Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this rather tragic solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. In fact, folks, at this juncture in the program, I'm going to completely discard with our traditional opening monologue due to the scale and scope of the atrocities that occurred just a stone's throw to the north of your humble host in Dallas, Texas last evening. Folks, there can be no question that what we witnessed unfurl before our very eyes yesterday evening in Dallas was the murder in cold blood of 5 law enforcement officers whose only sin was the fact that they happened to be white and to don the uniform of protection for their particular communities. Dallas is reeling in the face of the fact that these officers were gunned down by snipers who claimed that their entire modus operandi, in fact, the entire thing that motivated them to carry out this heinous attack was the fact that they wanted to kill white officers and show solidarity, unity, and support with a terrorist organization, a domestic terrorist organization known as the Black Lives Matters organization. And folks, going back to 2014 with the whole Ferguson, Missouri case that was built on a fraud, that whole shallow, hollow, empty, meaningless platitude of hands up, don't shoot, which actually didn't happen, we have seen them incrementally stepping up the violence. They have adopted the playbook of the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists whose entire agenda and purpose is to completely annihilate the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people. And what's so alarming and troubling about all of this is that they seem to be getting tacit support from this disastrous Barack Hussein Obama regime. Everywhere we turn, we see that this venomous hatred, this venomous vitriol that's being spewed on every avenue of social media continues to show support for unspeakable violence, intolerable violence to be thrown against our law enforcement officers. Statements such as, we just need to kill the pigs and kill every effing pig out there. That is disgusting. That, particularly in the wake of this unfolding and unspeakable atrocity and tragedy, should not be tolerated. But at the same time, we must not infringe upon the fundamental and inalienable God-given rights of the popular sovereigns. There's a delicate balance that must be achieved here. And that's what is always so difficult in the aftermath of something like this. And we know already the President of the United States has come out and said that this is, again, due to American citizens' easy access to firearms. Nothing could be further from the truth. Really, what is the instigating factor behind all of this is the racist vitriol that has become a cornerstone of this current regime. And folks, it shows no signs of improving at any time in the foreseeable future. We see that the presumptive nominee for the Democrats, who will supposedly be heading against the mafioso in the general election slated for November, Hillary Rodham Clinton, has gone out onto that same avenue of social media at Twitter and has shown her support for the Black Lives Matters organization in the aftermath of the shooting of that black teenager, or I'm not sure if it's a teenager this time or not, but the shooting that occurred in Louisiana. Instead of seeking the better angels of our nature, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists are using this as an opportunity to double down on their assault towards our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. This is intolerable. It's insufferable to think that that is the current state of affairs in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Yet that's exactly where we find ourselves right now, as I sit here and speak into this microphone and convey this message to you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. The United States of America is so much greater than this. We are better than what we are seeing displayed here. This is all because of that vicious notion of identity politics, that intellectually disingenuous seed of balkanization that has been sown in the body politique of the United States of America. And the question is, where do we go from here? How do we address this? How do we even begin to discuss this unspeakable tragedy, this unspeakable division and divisiveness that has become essentially a new norm in the most open, honest, and free society that mankind has ever known? It's not an easy thing to set ourselves to. It's not an easy task to accomplish. It's not something that has readily apparent and available answers. But it is time that we come together in solidarity and unity, standing shoulder to shoulder, to have a heart-to-heart discussion in America about what it is that caused this. I'm going to start off on the bat and say that no, this had nothing to do with our Second Amendment rights. These people would have discovered any form to use, any method to carry out their twisted machinations. In fact, they had even claimed that they had spread bombs all throughout downtown Dallas. Now, that has not seemed to fold out to be the truth, but we don't know. What we do know is that there is this concerted effort by those on the extreme left to target our law enforcement officers for this sort of unspeakable violence, this sort of wanton death and destruction. And it really strikes to the heart of a problem that has been festering all throughout these two disastrous terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. Think back to the earliest days of his regime, when there was that professor who attempted to break into his own home, and his neighbors called the police on him because they weren't sure who he was or what he was doing because of the distance and the time of day that it occurred. And the president stood before the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and proclaimed that the police had acted stupidly. Ever since he assumed the reins of political power in the United States back in January of 2009, Barack Hussein Obama has stoked the flames of racial animus and hatred. And for what? For what purpose? What does it accomplish other than doubling down on a Fabian socialist agenda, that of divide and conquer? You see, balkanization is their goal. They want us to no longer see ourselves as unified people, drawn together by the supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, is none other than the Constitution itself, because they want to overwhelm the system. It's Cloward and Piven, but it's also a bloody, evil, and wicked ideology that has no place and should never be tolerated in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. There can be no comfort, there can be no solace, until we actually address the real root of the problem. And the root of the problem has never been the ability of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people, in being able to exercise and safeguard our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That is a false narrative. That is a red herring that is being thrown out there by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists and their allies in the salivating mainstream media to try and further divide the people. They see that there is a loose stitch in the societal fabric of the United States of America, and they are relentlessly tugging on that, hoping to unravel the entire edifice of our once thriving and flourishing representative republic. And it's disgusting. It's sickening. It goes to the heart of the matter of all that is ailing us as a nation. And we see that race relations in the United States are at an all-time low. They haven't been this bad since the pre-civil rights era. And the blame for that, and the responsibility for that, can be laid at the feet of this regime. Just a few hours ago, Attorney General Loretta Lynch went in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and essentially tried to sit there and say that it wasn't the protesters' fault. Now, granted, to be fair, the protest that had been occurring in Dallas up until these twin snipers, or two snipers, had engaged in their Black Lives Matter hatred, were relatively peaceful. And the police were there doing their duty to protect them. And isn't it amazing that despite everything that has been wielded against our hard-working, decent law enforcement officers in this country, they are still willing to run into harm's way to protect, serve, and defend? It goes to show that we here in the United States have to be extremely cautious about the narrative that's going forth. And not just the narrative in the political sense. I'm talking about those people that would go forth into social media in order to try and make political hay out of this, in order to continue to try and spew vitriol, venom, and hatred towards our law enforcement officers. These people deserve to be ostracized. They deserve to be held accountable. But where do we draw the delicate balance so that we are not destroying the First Amendment? Well, remember, there is this notion of the fighting words doctrine, that certain types of speech are not protected, those that incite violence, those that are clearly a terroristic threat. Now, it still has to be adjudicated. It still has to be handled within the proper constitutional framework of it all, but isn't it about time that the Justice Department stop playing favorites? Isn't it time that we go back to equal protection under the law as is required in the clear and concise language of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution? I think that's where the conversation needs to start. This selective enforcement of the law, this selective outrage, which is just pointed at the rights of the people, or for some made-up notion that really has no place in a true open dialogue, such as that ridiculous notion of so-called white privilege, that's the discussion of division. It's time that we stop looking at it like that. It's time that we start realizing that once again, there is one thing in this nation which has been with us since the very inception of this nation 235 years ago, that unites us both as a nation and as a people. And this thing of which I speak is none other than our Constitution. It may seem out of place to mention it here, but no, it's that important. It is that which guides us. But more than guides us, it defines us. It tells us what the right thing to do is. And clearly, Americans are suffering right now. They're looking out at this senseless, unspeakable, horrific act of wanton violence and terrorism. Yes, folks, this is a form of domestic terrorism. And yet we know that Johnson is sitting there and saying that right-wing extremists are a greater threat of terror. But the American people are looking at this tragedy and wondering, what's happened? What has happened to this country? Why have we been thrust down this path, this unspeakable, unacceptable, intolerable path that we find ourselves on now? And the answer to that question rests in the hands of those frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who do not give a damn about the well-being of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. They want this sort of chaos. They want this sort of instability because that further advances their twisted agenda. So, come hell or high water, they will do anything and everything in their power to drive this wedge between the American people. And not to benefit anyone other than themselves. It's why they cannot divorce themselves or distance themselves from their dark and twisted narrative and agenda. But it really does have no place here in the United States. And it is high past time that we hold them accountable for everything that they've done, for all of the things that they try and do with this divisiveness. 5 law enforcement officers are dead. and over 10 are. Why? All because these people have bought into the language of Barack Hussein Obama inciting violence, the language of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that take any and every given and available opportunity to spread the seeds of discontentment and to pit American citizen against American citizen. And it's the scope of this tragedy is unspeakable. It's unbearable to think that this country has been pushed to the limit like this, has been pushed over the edge, has been basically divided to the point where American citizen is pitted against American citizen, and they're attempting to tear each other's jugulars out. And it shows that there is an attempt here to have two narrative strains which are diametrically opposed to one another. One has to be right, certainly both cannot. And so how do we address this? We address it by going back to the Constitution. We address it by holding those who have done everything in their power to spread and incite this violence accountable. It is unacceptable what's happening. Unacceptable. And certainly we need to condemn those that are going to sit there and try and say that it is our rights. Our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights are there to protect us from this sort of nonsense and madness. Because remember, as the old adage goes, an armed society is a polite society. Well, that is applicable here. These people would have sought any method to carry out their dark, twisted machinations, irrespective of what harm it might cause, irrespective of anything it might do, just as long as it carried out their narrative, a narrative that has received tacit support from the highest levels of government in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and community of popular sovereigns of ours, right from the highest office in the land. Does that not speak volumes about the current problems that are plaguing and ailing us, both as a people and as a nation? I think it does. I think it speaks tremendously about what is unfurling before our very eyes. And we see that the way that the Federal Department of Justice, the DOJ, has gone out and tried to investigate everything like this before, but not this case, because the tables have supposedly turned, and have gone after police officers. They are essentially trying to say that our law enforcement officers are guilty until proven innocent, denying them the traditional and American notion of a presumption of innocence. As an officer of the court, I cannot, will not, shall never tolerate that sort of departure from the supreme law of the land, from the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of the United States of America. Because when we get away from this whole notion that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men, that is when we start to see selective enforcement of the law. That is when anarchy and chaos reign supreme. We can ill afford that. We simply cannot afford that, particularly in the wake of such an unspeakable and dastardly attack that was carried out in Dallas last evening. And certainly our hearts and prayers go out to the family, the friends, the loved ones, and the compatriots of those who were so ruthlessly murdered yesterday evening. This is the land of the free, the home of the brave. Why have we allowed ourselves to fall to this point? Why have we allowed the planks of political division to make us believe that our law enforcement officers are some force for evil? That in and of itself is an unspeakable evil. That in and of itself is an intolerable position that has been fostered and encouraged by a bloodthirsty, salivating mainstream media. They're the ones that carry out this narrative, without any second thought as to the harm that it actually causes, without even a second consideration as to what any unintended consequences might arise out of it. No, that doesn't matter to them. All that matters to them is their narrative. And they will not back down from that narrative. They will never walk away from that narrative, because that narrative is what drives them. In their black, dark, and twisted hearts, that's what they think is right. But it's not right. If you look at some of the pictures that were coming out of the scenes of Dallas, you would see black and white officers standing together, crouching down for cover, trying to protect the citizens around them, doing their duty, living up to their oath. Those are the best and brightest in our culture, in our community. They are there to try and maintain peace, law, and order. And the biggest concern of theirs, their highest priority, is that they can go home to their family and loved ones, because one of the officers who was gunned down in Dallas last night had just been married 2 weeks prior. Does anyone care about her? Does her life not matter? Clearly not to the domestic terrorist organization, the Black Lives Matters group. No, it doesn't matter to them. That's why their followers and adherents have been polluting the entire avenues of social media with their vitriol and their hatred of saying we just need to kill all pigs, that all pigs are the same, blah, blah, blah. Well, those people can go straight to hell, because they are the ones that encourage this sort of nonsense. Their own hatred, their own venom, their own animosity is what drive the flames of divisive division here in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And to think that that is being tacitly supported by the highest office in the land, that too is insufferable. That too is an unspeakable malfeasance that must be addressed. But it's not going to be. Not in this current political atmosphere that is charged with the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism. That's why my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, has so oft times mentioned on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that we here at the Wright Flyer have declared war on this destructive notion of political correctness, because it clouds people's judgment. It prevents people from discussing the truth. But folks, the truth always has a way of coming through, always has a way of coming forth and shining the light on this and every situation. What really America needs now is a reminder that we are all citizens of the United States of America, that we are all drawn together in our capacity as popular sovereigns by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. We need to turn to our law enforcement officers and say that you are not standing alone, because by God, you are not standing alone. We know that what you're facing when you don that uniform each and every day and rush into harm's way is a thankless job. But guess what? It's not fully thankless. I'm going to go forth on a limb here and say thank you to our law enforcement officers. Thank you to our brave men and women who risk their lives on a daily basis, and to also reiterate that we will not allow these criminals to work their twisted machinations anymore, and that these domestic terrorists shall be held accountable for everything that they're doing. You see, part of the great onus of responsibility of being able to freely enjoy and exercise our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights is the ability to accept responsibility for our actions. Self-responsibility, self-accountability, that all leads to self-determination. And the fact that our law enforcement officers are feeling as though they are being assaulted by not only this domestic terrorist organization, but by the top law enforcement officer in the country, Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and then before her, Attorney General Eric Holder, former Attorney General Eric Holder, and of course, President Peel and Squeal himself. That is insufferable. That is intolerable, because that has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. Where do we even begin to try and make sense of that which is by its nature senseless? Well, we do it by reminding ourselves of what is important in this country, what it is that propelled this country to such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious shared history. And that is the compassion of the American people. That is the compassion and the understanding of our Constitution and what it means. Because it draws us together. It's the only thing that does. It's the only thing that we share in common. And that is why it's so precious. It's why our law enforcement officers have sworn an oath to uphold and defend that Constitution. And that's what those 5 officers who tragically lost their life last night were attempting to do. They were trying to live up to their oath, to fulfill their duty. And they deserve our utmost respect. They, along with all of their compatriots who are willing to march into harm's way, donning the uniform of their respective law enforcement agencies to protect and serve. Again, no one in this nation deserves to be slaughtered simply for their vocation. That's just the way it is. That's how it has to be. But we see that the madness and the flames of division and divisiveness and balkanization and identity politics are continuing to be fanned. Already, those on the left are attempting to politicize this issue. They're trying to say we can't judge all of Black Lives Matters just on the actions of a few. Yet at the same time, they try and say that this is every law-abiding gun owner in this country that needs to be punished for this idea that there's too easy and ready access to firearms in this country. They've come out and they said that due process under the law is killing us. No. Hate-filled individuals who are evil, who are inspired by evil, who are motivated by twisted machinations, those are what are killing us. That's what ails us. That and an unwillingness by the halls of government to admit that this is a real problem. That Islamofascism and frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists have essentially drawn a line in the sand and have declared war on this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and community of popular sovereigns of ours. And unless and until we actually begin to frame it in these proper terms, we are never going to be able to get to the bottom of this. This whole idea of white privilege, this whole idea of balkanization, it's got to stop. It has to stop. It cannot be, it will not be, it shall not be accepted in an open and honest society, a free society like that of the United States of America. But on the flip side of this coin, as I mentioned from the very outset of this very tragic show today, we cannot do that by trampling upon the fundamental and inalienable God-given rights of the American citizen. Because if we do that, then we are handing tangential victory to those who are seeking to fundamentally and irreparably transform the United States of America away from that of a representative republic that is constitutionally endowed to some Fabian socialist dystopia. If we give them victory, it is only going to encourage them to engage in these wanton acts of violence even more. And we need to start really holding the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media's feet to the fire. No longer will we tolerate those who go out and preach the messages of divisiveness, hatred, and vitriol. It's time to stop pitting American citizen against American citizen, and it's time to start honoring our shared tradition, heritage, character, and above all, identity. Because when we are united, no force on earth is big enough to destroy us. But we can tear ourselves apart from within, and then we can topple. And that is exactly what these diabolical Fabian socialists are all about. They want to pit us against each other. They want us to tear ourselves apart from within and to tear asunder the societal fabric and framework of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And they are succeeding. What Dallas proves to us last night is they are succeeding in spreading the seeds of hate in the United States. They are pitting us against each other, and it must stop. Here it is, folks. We must turn to the Constitution. We must say that those who would speak against equal protection under the law are standing in opposition to all that we hold near and dear in America. Again, it's all about accountability. For the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists, this is about power and greed. And that is why you see rank corruption. We need to call out the auspices of government that would allow someone like Hillary Rotten Clinton to carry out criminal activities and not be held accountable. We need to make them accountable themselves. We need to say that these sorts of intolerable, insufferable situations and scenarios cannot and will not and must not ever be tolerated here in the United States of America. Now, I know that's easier said than done, particularly when we are inundated with these overzealous attempts to regulate our lives, to ensure that we are incapable of carving out a living for ourselves and maintaining our way of life and our standard of living. It's as the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs warned us about over 50 years ago in his magnus opus Keynes at Harvard, that they thrive off of this, that they are banking on the fact that the American people are going to be so intertwined and involved with their day-to-day life that they simply lack the political power and capital to stand up to these things, particularly when they're using intellectually disingenuous verbiage to push forth their twisted, dark, and unacceptable machinations. Everything that unifies us needs to be strengthened. Our compassion, our commitment to law and order, our commitment to our fellow citizens, that needs to be a resounding message. And it's something that's not even being conveyed by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. Again, because it goes against their propagandistic, twisted, Fabian socialist agenda. But why is that being tolerated? Why is that being accepted? It can't be. It can't be any longer. We have to put our foot down now, because there is far too much at stake here. There is far too much that we have to defend to allow this to continue unabated. And as long as they are going to continue and try and spread the seeds of division and vitriol and the venom of hatred, then we're not going to see an improvement in any of this. But the way that we hold them accountable is we hit them where it hurts. We go out on our own. We look up the information for ourselves, and then we challenge them. We let them know that it's not going to work for their ratings any longer to try and spread hatred like this. We stand up and show compassion where compassion is due, and we correct them where they're wrong. This is where the voice of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty is such a powerful force in this country. Yet, so many have been led to believe that their voice has little meaning, that it doesn't count. No, your voice absolutely counts. It absolutely matters. And it has to be, sounded off so that these forces cannot just deny it. Now, they're going to try and sweep it under the rug. That's why we stand together, shoulder to shoulder, in solidarity and unity, and refuse to allow them to bury this, refuse to allow them to sugarcoat or candy coat it. No, we will stand together, and we will defend that which is of the utmost importance. The sanctity of our once thriving and flourishing representative republic counts on it. It's counting upon us to do this, and we will do it. It's our duty, our obligation, and above all, our responsibility in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty here in the United States of America. Again, I fully realize that this is not an easy task, and I fully realize it's a frightening thought that we are facing down such horrific, unspeakable, dastardly deeds by those who have nothing but outright hatred for each and every one of us. Don't think that Black Lives Matters is some noble cause, that the social justice warriors who flock to their ranks are somehow carrying out some good and noble deed in the United States, because nothing could be further from the truth. What these people are doing, what they're attempting to set forth and achieve here, is destructive. It's evil. And it's downright un-American. And after the events that unfurled in Dallas, Texas last evening, is it not time that we really hold them accountable? Any time that they sit there and spread the vitriol of violence, they need to be held accountable for this. But you see, that's the major thing with respect to the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists who have this radical and twisted anti-American agenda. They don't want to hold the members of their rank and file accountable for their statements, for their words, deeds, and actions. They want there to be selective enforcement of the law. They want to create so-called insular and discrete minorities that receive disparate treatment under the law. That cannot, must not, shall not, will not ever be tolerated in a true, open, and honest representative republic like that of the United States of America, because it is diametrically opposed to the natural law tenets that underpin not only our shared United States Constitution, but indeed the very representative Republican form of government that has served us for so long. Again, one of the messages that is being swept under the rug here is the fact that our Constitution is the longest contiguous running or uninterrupted running constitutional document in the entire scope and course of human events. And that is part of their agenda, part of their goal of pitting American citizen against American citizen. Inclusiveness and unity is something that's important here, but it can't be a false unity. It has to be a real type of unity. It has to be something that clearly draws the American people closer together. And I know that means that our work is cut out for us, but part of the entire purpose of this movement that my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I have come up with, the constitutional compositionist movement, is to work towards drawing the American people together. What is it that unifies us? What is it that solidifies us as a nation and even defines us as a nation? It's the Constitution. It's that divinely inspired social contract that exists between all of the wielders of popular sovereignty and their government. And it's by that we understand how we're supposed to act, what we're supposed to do. And this is why it's so important to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of the Constitution. Because by encouraging that, by living by that, then we take the necessary steps towards creating that more perfect union. In fact, when you look at the opening lines to the preamble to the United States Constitution, you will find that it says, "We the people do ordain and establish this Constitution in order to seek that more perfect union." We realize that perfection, at least in this in this earthly mortal plane, is impossible. Perfection cannot be achieved, but that does not mean that we ever give up on striving to reach perfection. Each successive generation building upon what was handed down to them. And make no mistake about it, folks, the Constitution is the greatest inheritance and birthright afforded to any people on the face of the planet. We are just exceedingly lucky. And that's what makes these organizations like Black Lives Matters, all of these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who loathe and despise the United States, the Blame America First crowd, that's what makes them so dangerous and so intellectually disingenuous. They want you to think that you have it terrible here. And that's why they seek to undermine the Constitution, to cause society to implode from within. And we see that they do it in ways that split and divide the American people so that they can thereby conquer the American people. Enough is enough. That cannot be allowed to continue unabated. That cannot be allowed to be the source of how this country works. Because when you stop and think about just what it is that they're doing, and how they carry out these plots, these diabolical schemes that they have worked towards now ever relentlessly, incessantly, for essentially the last 150 years, you'll see that they are meticulous and patient. They're willing to take however much time is necessary to carry forth their ideas. They're willing to destroy this country, to replace it with something that we were never intended to be. And they don't seem to care about the fact that the things that they're pushing for, these twisted notions and ideologies that they want to become the central tenets and pillars of society, have failed everywhere that they've been tried and attempted. That doesn't matter to them. Facts and reality have no meaning to them, carry no weight for them, and therefore they'll just double down on their efforts, come hell or high water. They will do whatever they can to tear this nation apart at the seams and accomplish their goals. But we see the pain and suffering that their twisted machinations cause. We see the wanton violence that arises in the wake of the insightful language, inciting violence on the part of the highest echelons of the federal government. Why? Why do we allow ourselves to be plagued and burdened by this barbarism? And yes, folks, that's what it is. It is sheer, unadulterated barbarism. There is no more adequate nor fitting description for what is out there, for what they are doing to us. And make no mistake about it, folks, they are not going to back down. This is just encouraging them. Well, stop allowing it to happen. We must stop this. And the way we do that is by standing in solidarity and unity, shoulder to shoulder, with our law enforcement officers, show them our support, thank them on a daily basis, and do what we can to assist them. That means if we even suspect that one of these Black Lives Matters members is seeking to orchestrate violence, to carry out a dastardly attack like that which unfurled in Dallas yesterday evening, we report it. And we let the constitutional framework of our criminal justice system work as it needs to. And we stop instantly jumping towards trying our law enforcement officers in the court of public opinion rather than in front of a jury of their peers. Because when we do that, that is when we allow the death and destruction and the wanton terror that was just hurled against the body politic of the United States of America last night in Dallas to continue unabated, unaddressed, to allow it to accelerate to new heights and speeds. Enough is enough. No longer can we sit idly by and just allow this to go forth in our community, because it is strengthening them. They are now more resolved than ever to continue their drive against the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. They are more dedicated now than ever to the complete and utter annihilation of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And it must stop, because they do not speak for us. They shall not represent the United States of America. They do not, because they are diametrically opposed to the very thing that defines us both as a people and a nation, our supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what is commonly known as the Supremacy Clause, is none other than the United States Constitution itself. But we're certainly not going to see any real form of leadership come out of this diabolical regime. They're not going to hold these people accountable. No, they're going to walk the easy and predictable path, the path of their agenda, the path of blaming decent, hard-working, law-abiding, red-blooded American citizens and their fundamental and inalienable God-given right to keep and bear firearms. That, to them, that is the cause of this, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. So, when leadership allows a power vacuum of this magnitude to exist, particularly in the wake of an unspeakable atrocity and wanton act of terrorism, it falls on the shoulders of we the people to step up to the plate and to do what is right and necessary. And I think that the American people are at that point now. We understand unequivocally and intrinsically that that is our duty, our obligation, and above all, our responsibility. And it's not just for the security of ourselves. It is for the sanctity of the community of popular sovereigns. It is our duty to help one another in our capacity as popular sovereigns, in respect to our shared citizenship. You see, that's why the notion of the greater good here in the United States of America is so important. It's why it's so sad, and why Jeremy and I have oft times lamented on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that it is so tragic that we have seemingly lost that. The seeds of balkanization, the seeds of divide and conquer which have been sown in the body politic of the United States of America must be rejected wholeheartedly. And folks, this is our opportunity to do so. It's not my purpose here to seek to politicize a tragedy. The left does plenty of that for us. What I'm seeking to do here is to reach anyone, even those who disagree with me, and say, look, there is something more important than us. There is something that goes to the heart of what it means to be an American, what it means to stand up for our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, and we must be dedicated to it. We must be stalwart in standing up for it and protecting it and promoting it. But in order to do that, we have to have an open dialogue. We have to be able to communicate with one another. We have to be able to sit down and speak about this like rationed, reasoning people. That's what we always did in the past. And it's what we can do again, if we set our minds to it. And that's what we are attempting to do here. But that means that we have to take it upon ourselves to do the difficult tasks that are in front of us, to stand up for what is right and just. Now, that's never easy. I understand that. But we are at a crossroads here, folks. We can either allow this to continue, or we can do what our founding fathers would expect us to do, to promote the supreme law of the land, to remind the government that when they act in a rogue, tyrannical, and illegitimate fashion, as they have been leading up to and in the immediate aftermath of such a disaster, that we will hold them accountable, that they cannot get away with that we have our eyes on them and we expect them to live by their oath, their obligation, their duties, and their responsibilities. That's what it means to proactively maintain and safeguard our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That is what it is going to take. And we must be bold at heart. We must reject those who preach this hatred, this division, this divisiveness, and we must show them that they will never succeed because they're not big enough to. Because what we stand for and what we swear allegiance to is far greater than any of us in our individual capacity. And it's also important that we come together and remind everyone that our Constitution does not belong to the government. It does not belong to Barack Hussein Obama or Loretta Lynch. No, it belongs to we the people. It is our Constitution. And when they attempt to trample upon it, and when they spread the seeds of dissent as they have been, casting it in a wide net, then they are acting in a way that is diametrically opposed to our ownership of the Constitution. They are stepping upon us, they are dishonoring us, they are not representing us. And it is high past time that that comes to a swift and immediate end, because the United States of America is greater than the sum of its parts. It goes back to that old adage that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that aspect of our culture, our community, and our society that really does lift us beyond and distinguishes us from everything that has come before is the fact that we have the natural law tenets that form the bedrock foundation of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and community of popular sovereigns of ours. And we have to spread the knowledge of that. We must be dedicated to it. We must be relentless. And that is the first step. We here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have always been dedicated to providing you with practicable, real-world solutions to these problems that arise, to all of these hurdles and adversities that are placed on our path, because we know that only by acting together can we overcome these things. That is what we must do. And we are dedicated to it. We will never abandon that. We will never walk away from that. And that means ultimately holding those who are attempting to attack us accountable for their deeds and actions. Because clearly the shooters were out there claiming that they were acting because they wanted to kill a white police officer. Well, under political correctness, we couldn't call that racism. Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here and tell those people to go straight to hell, that they are not indicative, not representative of who we are, either as a people, because we are greater than that. We are much better than that. We have always been better than that. Our entire identity arises from the fact that we are the beneficiaries of the longest contiguous running constitutional document in the entire scope and breadth of humanity. World history has never seen as successful or as free or as open or honest a community as that of the United States of America. And that's something that we have to take to heart. That's something that is quintessentially important with respect to how we define ourselves and to how we respond to these sorts of unspeakable acts of wanton violence, death, destruction, tyranny, and oppression. Because when we start to trample upon our rights, that's when they start to have victory. That's when we hand these frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftists who are hell-bent on destroying the United States of America victory. We cannot hand them victory. We cannot allow them to achieve success here. Because as soon as we do that, then it gives those nefarious forces carte blanche just to destroy everything. And make no mistake about it, folks, that's what the left is dedicated to. Sheer, unadulterated destruction, carnage, death, chaos, anarchy, all of these things. That is what their philosophy is founded upon. It's not founded upon the truth of the natural law. They want to sit there and say that there is no such thing as the natural law. They want to convince you that the government has given you rights because then the government can come and take it away. That's not who we are. That has no relation to who we are, either as a nation or as a people. Because when we come together, standing shoulder to shoulder, in solidarity and unity, in defense of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, and in staunch condemnation of these terrorist organizations like Black Lives Matters, that is when we are unstoppable. Now, to those protesting organizations that came out and said that this is not what they're about, and that they're all about peace, okay? I tell you what, then you need to start reporting those members in your ranks who sit there and say it's a good day to go kill pigs. You need to start holding your own accountable, and you need to go to law enforcement. You need to work with law enforcement. I have no problem with you voicing your opinions. I have no problem with you even protesting. What I have a problem with is when you allow these people to fan the flames of venomous vitriol and don't hold them accountable. You need to constantly say that you are a non-violent movement. That is how you can continue to act. But thus far, I only see you saying this in the immediate aftermath of some violent act. Take us here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, for example. We always say that you should exercise your fundamental and inalienable God-given Second Amendment right responsibly. We're not against holding those accountable who violate the fundamental and inalienable rights of their fellow popular sovereign. Because if you recall, one of the things that we have oftentimes reiterated here, to the point of it being repeated almost ad nauseum, is that our rights end where another's begin. And that means that we must be accountable for all of our deeds and actions. Because for every right that we have, there couches with it a duty, an obligation, and above all, a responsibility. And it falls upon us, in our capacity as popular sovereigns, to be the responsible ones, to act in an adult and responsible manner and fashion. And that's what we are doing. That is what we are dedicated to here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. And unless and until we, both as a nation and as a people, come together in solidarity and unity, in like-minded fashion, and have this open dialogue that I am suggesting that we need to have, then we're going to continue to see these charlatans, these frauds, these hucksters, these con artists, these snake oil salesmen continue to sow the seeds of dissension, hate, violence, depravity, death, and destruction. Because in their mind, they think that they have reached the pinnacle of success. They think that they are within grasp of their twisted goals. And as we have also repeated, they've been working meticulously towards this for the past century and a half. That cannot be allowed to continue. It cannot just be live and let live, because these people are not about letting us live. They're not about leaving us be. They're not about allowing us to just be who we are. They loathe and despise who we are. And they will do everything in their power to try and drive that wedge ever further into the hearts, souls, and minds of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And we cannot allow that to happen. We simply cannot. It is far too important that we be truly responsible for who we are and what we do. And that is so important, so very important, because that is the only way that this country will ever get back onto the path to prosperity. And it's our duty to see that it happens. And we will. We will. We always do. We always have the ability to come together. And we have always been able to overcome the hurdles, obstacles, and adversities that have been placed in our path. Now, folks, I know that I'm going to cut this program short, but it's important that we just have this conversation. And I think that I've essentially covered the most important aspects of everything that we needed to discuss here. So with that said, I want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. As always, I'm Randy Wright, and I've been your captain. I invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you may have either here on our YouTube page, our Google Plus page, or our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle @RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find our departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, our Blogspot page, which contains all sorts of useful information, including audio blogs, and our Cafe Press account, where you can buy all sorts of trinkets and goodies with either our main Wright Flyer logo or that of our first-class passengers. Go ahead and take a look. There's surely something there at a reasonable price that meets your fancy. Give us a little bit of support so that we can continue to provide you with this indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment that we do every time we take off over the friendly airwaves. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying the Wright Flyer. We will see you next time. Do take care.